back to Shattering Myths. I'm your host, Yahowah. We're going to turn the page and consider Yahowah's Torah testimony. Yesterday we were considering the locations of the headwaters of 4 rivers, and we were very easily able to determine what each of the 4 rivers are named today. The Tigris and Euphrates, of course, were obvious. The Gishon used to be the Gishon before the Greek conquest of the region, and the Red River was the Pishon. We were specifically told that that not only was its previous name bar the same consonant roots, but also that there was a great deal of red in association with it in Yah's testimony. So it makes it really clear as to what the 4 rivers are. And we found that the headwaters of each of those 4 rivers are within 100 miles of each other, all with Lake Van at its epicenter. And as I mentioned earlier, this blue oasis can be found 200 miles south of the easternmost shore of the Black Sea. And that is interesting for a number of reasons. And that is, first is because what appears to be mankind's oldest civilization is buried beneath the shores of the Black Sea, about under now a couple of 100 feet beneath the surface of the Black Sea. What we find is that the Black Sea was originally freshwater, and then instantly overnight not only changed to saltwater, but became 200 feet deeper than it was previously. Now, the reason that's interesting is that the whole flood story follows the story of the Garden of Eden. And Yahowah will use Kol Eretz, the whole land, the whole region, to describe this same region around Eden. And he will talk about an upwelling of salt water that created a great flood in that story. And what we find is him telling us that man became so corrupt that he had to reboot the system. And what we find is that just shy of 6,000 years ago, the area around the Black Sea went from fresh to salt water. It buried man's oldest known civilization 200 feet under that deluge of water. And it all happened exactly where God said it happened. We even find the Burkle crater, which is off the headwaters, not the headwaters, but the mouth of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, where an asteroid crater is of such size that we can find the effect of that crater in terms of the tsunami that it unleashed, going right up through Mesopotamia and through the Black and Caspian Seas, creating ultimately the waterway that is the straits near Istanbul into the Mediterranean. All 5,000 years ago as to when that occurred. Right when God said it occurred. There is considerable benefit in considering the archaeological discoveries. Even Ballard, the fellow that found the Titanic, he conducted series of surveys in this area to find those civilizations and to note that the Black Sea was fresh water prior to the upwelling of salt water 5,000 years ago that created the flood. Now, before we move on, I just want to reemphasize, too, that the place that the rivers flowed was called the Kol Eretz, the whole land, the whole area, or the whole region. And yet, when God uses the exact same phrase in reference to the flood, almost every English Bible errantly translates it the whole earth. It's little wonder that people get confused. It's little wonder that a statement that God makes that reveals not only history, but his personality and intent is corrupted to make God look stupid. His words, wielded accurately, are accurate. They provide a precise history. They provide revealing and enlightening insights and instruction. But when man translates them erroneously, capriciously, hypocritically, inconsistently, the religious result has a God that is stupid. And a lot of the reason why agnostics and atheists are agnostics and atheists is because the religious corruption of God is an idiot. You know, when religions don't counter for the fact of relativity, which God speaks of throughout his creation account, and they say that the universe is therefore 6,000 years old, they make their God look like a nincompoop. It's not God's fault. It's the idiots that perpetrate religion's fault. Just as it is with the whole land or region suddenly changing to the whole earth when the exact same phrase is used. Working to eradicate confusion, at least for the willing, to closely examine the Torah's jots and tittles, its yods, which is the smallest letter, and the tittles, which are the strokes of the remaining letters. In this passage, Yahowah reveals something that helps us tie the Shabbat and Sukkah together. The Shabbat is the seventh day. Sukkah is the seventh called-out assembly. They are both celebrations of us enjoying one another's company. Yahowah Almighty, I'm reading now from Bereshith. This is in the beginning, 2:15. Yahowah Almighty relationally grasped hold of Adam, the man, and he settled him restfully, nuach, in the sheltered garden, Gan of Eden, great joy and pleasure, total satisfaction, to work her and to closely observe her, shamar. Abad and shamar are the two verbs there at the end. So let's think about that for a moment. First of all, we have Yahowah identifying himself by name. If you read your English Bible, the religious decided that it was appropriate for them to change God's testimony and replace Yahowah's name with the Lord. And they made it the Lord God as opposed to Yahowah Almighty. Now, if you want to trust religious clerics who publish books that claim to be the Word of God, who deliberately, knowingly changed it to suit their agenda, then that's your choice. As for me, I'm going to reject them. As for God, he is doing the same. Goddamn religion is the approach that Yahowah himself takes. I would encourage you to take it as well. To damn, by the way, is to separate. In a bomb-prone world, we ought to be careful in this regard. To damn is to separate. God separates himself from religion. God damn religion. We ought to as well. He calls us to do so. Yahowah Almighty, relationally, eth, grasp hold of. So this is lakah. It doesn't say that he recreated man. It just says, the man that I previously created, I grasp hold of. I grasped hold of him by the hand. I selected him. I accepted him. And he accepted Adam, and he settled him restfully, nuach. Nuach is the word that describes the purpose of the Shabbat. It is used by Yahowah to describe what is to happen in the Shabbat. And in the Shabbat, it actually speaks of God settling the differences between us so we can settle down with him. He settles all unresolved issues to foster a close association, covenant alliance. In the sheltered garden of Eden. Gan Eden. What is the Gan Eden? Gan is a protected and sheltered garden that is conducive to life. And Eden is a celebration of life. Great joy, delight, pleasure, total satisfaction. There are times when it is appropriate simply to transliterate the Hebrew, as we do with Gan Eden, as Garden of Eden. And there are times to understand what the words mean, so that we can understand what God is telling us. Both are helpful. But it's interesting that your English Bible properly transliterated Eden as the title of this place, the name of this place, but they could not bring themselves to transliterate Yahowah's name, even though it's comprised of the same 22 letters that comprise every other word in the Hebrew language. Now, it is the next interesting part of this, to work her, to work with her. The garden is feminine. Eden is feminine. It speaks of protection. It's a metaphor for the role that our spiritual mother plays relative to our souls, where she covers us with a garment of light that protects us, that shelters us, that is conducive to life. And so this is a reference to the role of our spiritual mother, the set-apart spirit. But it is interesting that man was set there in part to engage, to cultivate, to labor. And that in itself is fascinating. Man was not set in the garden to languish. You know, those people like, we have so many in America now that are second and third generation welfare recipients, that are food stamp recipients, that are housing recipients, that don't work. Destructive to one's character. If you're not engaged in something, you die. You either grow or you die. God recognizes that the nature of life is that it needs to work. It needs to be engaged. It needs to have a purpose. If you don't have a purpose, then your character, your backbone, everything turns to mush. You know, what happens to an individual who is bedridden and does nothing? Don't their muscles all atrophy and all of their organs eventually fail? Larry, what do you think about God saying, the first thing that he's saying about man being settled in the garden is that he was there to engage, to labor, to cultivate, to work, not just be the ultimate couch potato, assuming there were couches in Eden.
Well, I think that's true. I think people have to have something to do to be productive. I mean,
yes. Yeah.
To grow.
When I retired from business, I recognized that those who retire and spend their lives playing golf or just doing nothing, being a couch potato, that they live a very short period of time and they live miserable existences. If you want to live and enjoy life, you need to engage. Welcome back to Shattering Myths. Fascinating insight that God says that we were placed in the garden to work with her, lo abad hai, to labor, to cultivate on her behalf. You know, it takes me right back, Larry, to the concept of the uniqueness of God, is that He not only talks the talk, He laid down for us in words everything that He has done and that He is offering, but He also walked the walk. He Himself engaged, which is work. I mean, it was
that's
really
something we're not used to. We're not used to powerful people walking the walk, sadly.
But when God walked the walk, was He not working?
Well, sure He was.
Yeah.
Of course, He did all our work for us.
Yeah, absolutely.
He did the work for us. That's why we have really nothing to do but observe it, understand it, and pass it along.
And capitalize on it. With the exception, and that's as it relates to the salvation, because He did the work, so it was good for Him. He's saying, work is good. I did this work on behalf of my children. That was good. I'm happy. I'm thrilled that I did this work on behalf of my children. But also, when you deal with a relationship, if you don't work on the relationship, you don't invest in that relationship, does it atrophy and die?
Oh, it'll be non-existent. I mean, you go back to, they removed His name, they removed Yahowah and replaced it with Baal's moniker, Lord.
Right.
Yahowah made Adam, according to him, for the purposes of companionship and association.
Right.
He didn't make him as a religious instrument of worship.
But it also says
how this all gets turned on its head is beyond belief. I mean, I know it took hundreds or thousands of years to do it, but we've got people running around thinking they're worshiping a religious deity, when religious deities, which you went over yesterday, these are the things that are never to come out of our mouth in any kind of way where
Right.
we show them reverence or we memorialize them.
But there's a bigger point here. The bigger point. What's the bigger the bigger point? What is
I'm always missing the point.
No. What was the primary point that Paul made in all of his letters? Paul's the founder of the Christian religion. What was the primary point that Paul made about the Torah?
That it was dead.
Well, and that works of the Torah could not save anyone. That works were dead. Faith was the source of life. So Paul's argument was, believe him, believe faith in the unknown and the unknowable. That was the source of life, where works based upon the Torah's explanations, that was the source of death. What is Yahowah saying? That man was created here as a celebration of life in a garden that was conducive to life, and then man was going to work. So God is saying that work is the substance that makes life and relationships worth living. That if we don't work, our bodies atrophy. If we don't engage in relationships, those relationships atrophy. The designer of humankind celebrates work. He himself not only talked the talk, he walked the walk. He engaged himself in engaging in work. Can you imagine an eternity where God says, we just created this new universe. There's Larry, there's a solar system out there that needs some attention. There's an opportunity for life, and it's just really being beautiful there. But there's some other stuff, like there's a black hole over here, and some dust in the atmosphere, and a number of things. Too many asteroids are hitting. Could you go? Here's some instructions. Could you go take care of that for me? And I think you're going to notice if you do these things, it's going to be a wonderful result. Wouldn't that be a cool thing to do?
Oh, absolutely. What wouldn't be cool would be sitting around in a circle, sort of prostrated to the ground, worshiping a religious deity for all eternity, because that would be my idea of hell, or close to it.
Exactly. And so what God is saying here is, if you want to enjoy life, if you want to grow, if you don't want your nature to atrophy, if you don't want the relationship that we're forming to atrophy, you need to engage. You need to be active. It's very much like I retired from my last business, and I decided that, to give life purpose, let's research and study and talk about the big issues. The big issues of what's wrong with religion, what's wrong with military interventions, what's wrong with politics, what's wrong with the media, and what's right with what Yahowah has to tell us. Why not make that contrast and use the rest of your life in a productive way by engaging as opposed to atrophying?
Yeah, and isn't it interesting that, when you lay out all of what Yahowah said, and then you look at what the press and all the politicians and all these people say, they're exact opposites.
Exactly. And then he not only says that he brought man into the garden and settled him there in this place that was joyful and conducive to life, not only to work, but to be observant. To be observant. To use your eyes to examine what's happening around you and to consider its implications. We'll return to Shattering Myths after the commercial break. Welcome back to Shattering Myths. God has revealed two fascinating aspects about the nature of life in the Garden of Eden. The first thing he says after he placed Adam there is that he was placed there in this garden that is conducive to life, to work and to observe. Larry, ask you a question. You have children.
Yes.
In your home, did your children have to contribute in any way to the family, either by helping prepare the meals, helping clean up after the meals, helping to keep the house clean, doing chores around the house, or did you completely coddle them and spoil them in every way?
No, they had jobs to do. They had to keep their room picked up. We ran, basically, when my kids were growing up, a more of a community center. We had a big pool, and there were always other kids there, and so we ran pretty much a Meals on Wheels program, if you will, and so
your children
were always
contributed.
responsible for. Yeah, and they were responsible for cleaning up. That was the whole thing. You can have as many kids as you want over. You can do whatever you want, but you're going to pick up. You're going to clean up. You know,
Okay.
and they all did it. I mean, they did it out of respect. Nobody had to lord over them. They did it.
So do you think that them working in this regard made them better or worse? Was the work a burden for them, or was it something that helped to build character?
It built character and responsibility, and today they're all successful at what they do, all of them.
Right. And a sense of satisfaction, as well as an understanding of what life's all about.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, my oldest used to get up in the morning at 5 o'clock. She became an all-American dancer when she was 16. By the way, she got cancer at that time, but she used to. Well, she lived. I mean, But
she made it.
She made it, and the thing is, she used to get my wife up.
Did she have to work at that? Both beating cancer and being a dancer, and did she get satisfaction from beating cancer and from dancing successfully?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So when Paul says, you ought not engage at all based on God's instructions in His Torah, you just ought to believe. Believing is doing nothing. Is doing nothing conducive to life or to growth or to relationships?
No. Never.
No, it isn't, is it? Now, the second thing that Yahowah...
It's a realistic idea. It's really...
Well, it is. It's something that sounds good until you think about it. If you think that not working is good, then lay in a bed all day long and watch television, and you tell me how good you feel after having done it. Now, the other aspect of this is he set up an environment where Adam would be observant. Yahowah never tells us that we have to obey his Torah, does he?
No, he tells us we need to observe it to understand it. That's what he says.
Right. And does observe mean obey?
No.
No. What does observe mean? No, just tell me what the word observe. It's shamar in Hebrew. In fact, it's clearer in Hebrew than it is in English. But what is if a scientist is going to observe an experiment? What if your children were going to observe the behavior of other children around your pool? What does that mean?
That means we're going to watch. We're going to take in. We're going to see what's going on. I can observe a boxing match. I'm a boxing fan and an MMA fan. I can observe a fight without being in there doing it. And I can explain what happened at the end of that fight. And that's what Yahowah is really asking us to do. But if you want to turn Yahowah's words on their head, then Torah has to become law. And observe has to become obey. And Yahowah has to become a religious deity called Lord.
A Lord. Yeah. Right. But God said He wanted us to observe His directions, His teaching. Right here in the garden. Does observing what God said require us to engage? Does it require work?
Well, it requires us to engage because we have to think about it. We have to observe. We have to understand what you're talking about, that He was having them do work in the garden.
Right,
and which is something most people just blow by. I mean, I don't know what you'd do for hundreds of years if you didn't have something productive to do.
Can you imagine any way that we could learn from Yahowah settling the man that He had created in His image in this garden that was conducive to life and great satisfaction, where He says that we're there to work together and that man's there to be observant? Is there any way that we could have learned the insights associated with this if we didn't do the work of examining and considering what He had to say?
No, it's impossible.
Right. And so is it possible that man then could have had a relationship with God without acting, without engaging, without being observant of what he said and considering what He said?
No, it's not possible. So is God not telling us that when we were settled in the garden with Yah, that
the nature of our relationship would be that we were going to engage and we were going to be observant, and therefore that what Paul wrote of disregarding, not observing the Torah, and of not engaging in the Torah, but instead just to believe, would that not put the relationship God intended and the religion that Paul envisioned at a collision course, being the opposite of one another?
Well, sure there would be, of course.
So why would anybody in their right mind be a Christian?
I have no idea. I mean, Yahowah tells us in his words not to imitate the religious in any way, shape, or form. And last I checked, every religion has faith in it, some concept of faith in it. In fact, is when people ask you what faith that you are, they're asking you what religion you are. Is that correct? Sure. That's exactly what they're asking.
All right. Faith and religion are identical concepts. Before we dissect the operative words here, nuach, settle, I'd like to resolve why the third-person singular pronoun her, which is he in Hebrew, included was suffixed, if you will, to abad and shamar, to observe her and to work her. It is because gan, sheltered garden, which is both feminine and masculine in Hebrew, is designed to provide a virtual portrait of our Heavenly Father's home, and especially of our role in that our spiritual mother plays in protecting and defending us so that we're prepared to enjoy God's company. Like any mother.
Covering her, the ruach.
Yeah, right. Ruach is a feminine noun in Hebrew. And there are, in the garden, gan can be both masculine and feminine. So God is showing us that he can respond to us and relate to us in both a paternal and maternal way. And that both, when you're dealing with a family, are important. You know, like any mother, the set-apart spirit's concern for the lives of her children prompts her to shelter them in love and to clothe them with great care. It is the garment of light that those of us who shamar, observe her, those of us who revere her and cling to her, that she covers us in so that we look perfect in God's eyes. You look at Dode, who we've called David, who was Torah observant, but he did not keep the Torah. In other words, there were huge aspects of God's instructions that he not only ignored, but did the opposite thing. But he was Torah observant, man. He studied it, he understood it, he celebrated it, and because of that, Yahowah looked at Dode as being perfect, righteous, vindicated. And that's as it is for us. We don't become perfect by doing what the Torah says. We become perfect by observing the Torah and acting upon its promises. And this is one of the ways. We are adorned in her light. We're sheltered in her covering. We are protected from the consequence and penalty of sin. The way the garment of light works is that in the presence of light, there is no darkness. It's not just that light is the opposite of darkness, because it isn't. Where there is light, there is no darkness. It doesn't cover up our sins. It obliterates them. Right. Where there is light, there is no darkness. And so the moment that God covers you and I in this garment of light, from his perspective, we are perfect. We don't just look perfect. We are perfect. It's an ingenious solution.
Yeah, which goes right back to a very important concept of set apart. At that point,
right.
One is set apart. And that means they're not judged, because anybody judged is dead. Anybody that wants to meet Yahowah on this plane of religiousness based on their actions and faith, and you don't want to meet him in that way, because you're dead.
Right, exactly.
You're already dead.
That's exactly. It brings me to a point that I didn't make in this statement. He took the man that he had created, Adam, and he placed him inside this garden, which means that he took Adam from the collective whole of our planet, and he set him apart in this specific garden that was conducive to life and to great joy and satisfaction, which means he set Adam apart from a world of pain and suffering, from death and dying. He set him apart. And the covenant is set apart. God is set apart. Those of us who embrace the covenant are set apart. And so God taking us by the hand and placing us within a protective enclosure is God setting us apart from the world and unto him. That's why the first half of this program is all about having folks focus on what's wrong with military invasions, what's wrong with economic schemes, what's wrong with political hypocrisy, what's wrong with religious poison. Because when we understand those things, we're more comfortable being set apart from them, distancing ourselves from them, so that we can be set apart in God's familial covenant relationship. That is what is being depicted here with Eden. And so when we study this, when we engage and we're observant, and we work at understanding, then we are the beneficiaries of knowing what it means to be part of God's family, which is to be set apart from the world of suffering, of death, and of dying.
Yeah, and that's a long way from the concept of being holy, whatever that means. Yeah.
Well, holy is a religious corruption. It is based upon the religions of Northern Europe. It's where the word originally came from. And what it does is it corrupts the concept of being set apart. In every place where Yahowah used Kodesh, which means to set apart or to be set apart, which is a powerful concept, religions changed it to holy. And holy is a religious concept. Set apart is a very pragmatic.
Yeah, even call set apart days, holy days.
Right. When you understand set apart, you understand the nature of the covenant. You understand the nature of God. You understand what God is calling us away from and what he is inviting us to. You understand who Yahusha is. You understand who the Spirit is. Everything makes sense when you understand set apart. Welcome back to Shattering Myths. We're talking about Yahowah telling us specifically that he created the Gan Eden, which was separated from the rest of the world around it, that it was a sheltered enclosure that was conducive to life, that it was a protected place, that it was designed to produce great satisfaction and joy, and that satisfaction and joy would be derived from us being willing to engage and us being observant. So with that known, we have Sharon calling in from Colorado, who has a question about what it means to observe. Hi, Sharon. Welcome to the program.
Thank you. Okay, so if we're to be observant, if we know and understand, doesn't that lead to obedience or to want to follow in his footsteps, do what he says to do and behave as he says to behave?
Yeah, obedience is a horrible term. There is no Hebrew word for obey, and that's one of the things that there's probably nothing that bugs me more than going from I'm providing you with instructions indicating what's good for you and what's counterproductive, and to go from free will and deciding whether or not you wish to engage based upon those instructions or ignore them, and that we move to the concept of obedience. Obedience is a really horrible term. It is a term that has no concept of free will. But I understand that a lot of people get tripped up on it. If you look at Dode, who was it's the individual that God reveres most of everyone that has ever lived on this planet. He loves Dode more than anyone else. Dode was foremost among all people who ever lived at observing the Torah. He wrote the 119th Psalm, which is a masterpiece to the Torah. Sharon, it is every statement. It takes each one of the 22 Hebrew letters and explains how that letter helps us understand the Torah and how we should respond to the Torah. And yet there's probably no person on earth who was as blatantly unobedient as it relates to the Torah instructions as Dode.
Okay, I'm going to jump in there. As a parent,
go ahead.
As a parent, like my father expected me, and I have this relationship with my children. I have a set of rules, and I want them to, through free will, choose to follow them. So that, like Larry was saying, you know, if they have a bunch of kids over, they got to clean up after them. That's the rule. So isn't there some type of, I guess, through our free will, we should choose to want to be like our father,
I think one of the problems. You've got problems twofold. One is you as a parent are establishing rules. God's not establishing rules. He's providing instructions. Instructions and rules are different things. God is God communicated instructions, and when He communicates those instructions, they are to enlighten us. As I say, no one understood the Torah better than Dowd. And Dowd understood that the purpose of the Torah was to enlighten us so that we could respond to the covenant that Yahowah was offering us. And that was the purpose of being observant. When you move to rules, then you're recasting what He provided us as law. There's very little difference between rules and law. Torah doesn't mean law, doesn't mean rules. It means instructions and guidance. And so the moment you move from you laid down the law with your children and expected them to obey what you said, then you've distanced yourself from the plan that God gave. God provided instructions, and He gave us free will as to whether or not we wished to ignore those instructions. We wished to focus on them, observe them, so that we could respond to what He was offering, or be opposed to them as religious individuals are. And so there's a reason that there's no Hebrew word for obey. You know, the moment you're obeying, you're not exercising free will.
But you're saying
almost everything that's in the Torah, we can't do. There's huge swaths of the Torah that we can't do. And the moment our focus becomes, we need to obey, we need to do these things, as opposed to this is teaching that we can learn from, I think we miss virtually everything that God is saying to us. I think we miss almost everything that He is offering us. Sharon, it's a good question. Love to discuss it with you further. We're at the end of our show today. Would encourage you to call back later this week, and we will pursue the difference between observation and obedience at another time. May God bless you all.